She kissed the millionaire on a dare and sealed her fate with a forbidden touch. What started as a simple challenge became an obsession she couldn't control. A dark love marked by secrets, control, and dangerous promises. If you love romance stories, stick around until the end. You won't regret it. Don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're listening to this amazing story from. Now, let's get back to it. The sound of the rain hitting the fogged-up bus window mingled with the swish of wet tires on the New York City asphalt. Chloe Miller pressed her forehead against the cold glass and closed her eyes, trying to ignore the crumpled envelope she held in her trembling hands. The red letters seemed to scream through the paper. Final collection notice, St. Helena's Clinic. $15,000. That's what she needed in 48 hours to keep her mother in the only facility that would still take her. 24 years old, and she had never felt so small. The full-ride scholarship that had supported her law studies at Columbia had vanished in a brutal administrative review, leaving her without the one thing that made her feel like she had a future. Now, as the bus crossed the city toward the Upper East Side, she wondered what the hell she was doing here, wearing a borrowed dress that smelled of perfume that was too expensive and carrying a purse that wasn't hers. "You have to go, Chloe," Becca's voice echoed in her memory. "It's a charity event for Montgomery Holdings. Rich people, important people. Maybe you can make a contact, get a job." Becca was her only real friend at the university, one of the few who didn't look at her like she was an invader in that world of inherited privilege. The bus stopped on Park Avenue, and Chloe got off, feeling the cold night air cut through the thin fabric of the dress. Her feet already ached in the tight shoes by the time she reached the mansion's gate. The property rose like a monster of glass and steel, all lit up against the dark sky, with uniformed valets receiving cars that cost more than she would earn in her entire life. She showed the digital invitation on her phone and passed the security guards, feeling their appraising gazes. Inside, the main hall buzzed with conversations at calculatedly low volumes, crystalline laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Chloe accepted a drink from a passing waiter and stood by a column observing this theater of vanities. That's when she saw her. Lauren Vanderbilt approached like a serpent dressed in black silk, her wavy blonde hair falling perfectly over her bare shoulders. Chloe knew her by sight from the university, but they had never spoken. Lauren was the type born with the world in her hands, and she made sure everyone knew it. "Chloe Miller," Lauren smiled, but there was something sharp in that smile. "What a surprise to see you here." "Hi, Lauren." Chloe tried to sound casual, but her voice came out tense. "You know, I've always admired your determination." Lauren took a sip of her champagne, her eyes never leaving Chloe's face. "It must be hard to be here, in this environment, knowing you don't belong." The comment was like a slap. Chloe felt the heat rise up her neck, but she maintained her composure. "I'm here just like everyone else." "Of course you are," Lauren laughed, a melodious and cruel sound. "But tell me something, Chloe. How far would you go for money?" The question landed like a stone in Chloe's stomach. "What do you mean?" Lauren leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let's say I have a proposition for you. Something simple. Something that could solve your financial problems." Chloe glanced around nervously. A few people nearby were starting to pay attention to their conversation. "What kind of proposition?" "See that man over there?" Lauren pointed discreetly to the other side of the hall. "Ethan Montgomery, our host." Chloe followed Lauren's gaze and saw him. Even from a distance, Ethan Montgomery was impossible to ignore. Tall, with dark hair combed back, he wore a suit that looked like it had been molded to his body. There was something in the way he moved, in the way people subtly parted when he passed, that suggested power. Real power, not just money. "And?" Chloe asked, though she already felt she didn't want to know the answer. $10,000, Lauren said simply, "if you can manage to kiss him." Chloe almost choked on her champagne. "Are you insane?" "I'm serious." Lauren took her phone out of her purse. "Record the moment, prove you did it, and the money is yours. Instant transfer." "Why would you do that?" Chloe felt her heart race. $10,000. It wasn't enough to save her mother, but it was a start. It was hope. Lauren shrugged. Let's just say I enjoy interesting games, and you look like you need the money. Chloe looked again at Ethan Montgomery. He was talking to a group of businessmen, but there was something isolated about him, as if he were physically present but absent in every other way. His eyes were dark, almost black, and when he occasionally swept the room with his gaze, people seemed to shrink slightly. "What if he reports me? What if he calls security?" Chloe asked. "He won't." Lauren smiled again, that smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Trust me." Chloe closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her mother lying in that hospital bed, lost in her own fragmented memories. She thought of the crumpled envelope in her purse, of the red numbers that seemed to scream her inadequacy to the world. When she opened her eyes, Lauren was still watching her, waiting. "How do I know you'll keep your promise?" Lauren showed her the phone screen, where her banking app was already open. "I'll set up the transfer now. As soon as you show me the video, I'll confirm it." Chloe took out her own phone with trembling hands and opened the camera. The screen showed her reflection. A pale face, large and frightened eyes, dark brown hair pinned in a bun that Becca had done. She didn't look like she belonged here, but maybe that was exactly why she was about to do this. "Just a kiss?" she asked. "Just a kiss?" Chloe took a deep breath and started walking across the hall. Each step seemed amplified on the polished marble, though the sound was muffled by the conversations and the soft music playing from discreet speakers. She kept her phone in position, pretending to check something on the screen while actually starting the recording. As she got closer, she could see Ethan Montgomery more clearly. He had to be about 35, maybe a few years older, with a face that could have been carved from marble. There were small scars near his left temple, almost imperceptible, and his hands, as he gestured during the conversation, moved with a precision that suggested absolute control. When she was a few feet away from him, Ethan stopped talking and turned his head in her direction. His eyes met Chloe's, and she felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. There was something in that gaze that made her stop in her tracks, like an animal caught in headlights. The businessmen he was talking to followed his gaze and saw her too. One of them muttered something she couldn't hear, but Ethan raised a hand in an almost imperceptible gesture, and the man fell silent immediately. "Excuse me," Ethan said to the others, his voice low but charged with authority. He started walking toward her. Chloe's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. The plan had been to get close to him, kiss him quickly and run. But now, with him coming toward her, she felt completely exposed, as if he could read her thoughts. "Good evening," he said when he stopped in front of her. His voice had an almost imperceptible accent, too polite, too polished. "Good evening," she managed to reply, though her voice came out weaker than she intended. "I don't know you." He tilted his head slightly, studying her face with an intensity that made her blush. "And I know everyone here." "Chloe Miller." She extended her hand, trying to seem more confident than she felt. He took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he brought it to his lips and kissed it gently. The gesture was so unexpected that she almost dropped her phone. "Ethan Montgomery," he said, still holding her hand. "And what brings someone like you to a night like this?" There was something in the way he said "someone like you" that didn't sound disrespectful, but rather intrigued, as if she were a puzzle he wanted to solve. I'm in law school," she said, trying to think of a plausible reason to be there. "Specializing in corporate law." "Interesting." He still hadn't let go of her hand. "And where do you study?" "Columbia. The best university in the country," he smiled, and for the first time since she'd seen him, he seemed genuinely interested. "You must be very smart." Chloe felt her face heat up again. There was something hypnotic in the way he spoke, as if each word were carefully chosen for maximum impact. "Can I ask you something?" she said before she could stop herself. "Of course." "Why are you here alone? I mean, it's your party, but you seem isolated," he completed. "Perhaps because I prefer to observe rather than participate." "Observe what?" "People. How they behave when they think no one is paying attention. How they reveal their true intentions through small gestures." He finally released her hand but didn't step away. Like you, for example. Chloe's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? You're nervous. Your hands are trembling slightly. You've been avoiding my direct gaze, and there's something about the way you're holding your phone that suggests you're not here just to talk. Chloe felt the blood run cold in her veins. He knew. Or at least he suspected something. I don't know what you're talking about. She tried to sound indignant, but her voice trembled. No? He leaned in slightly, closing the distance between them. Then tell me, Chloe Miller from Columbia Law, what is the real reason you're here tonight? She glanced around quickly. Lauren was watching from a distance, an expectant smile on her face. Other people had also noticed the intense conversation between them. Chloe felt like she was on a stage, with spotlights pointed at her. She started, but couldn't finish the sentence. Ethan tilted his head further, his eyes fixed on hers. You can tell me the truth, you know. I won't judge you. There was something in his voice, an unexpected kindness that made her lower her guard. For a moment, she almost told him everything. Almost told him about her mother, the money, the desperation that had brought her here. But then she remembered what was at stake. $15,000. Her mother's life. The only chance she had. Without a second thought, she stepped toward him and kissed him. The kiss was supposed to be quick, mechanical, just to win the bet. But the moment their lips met, something changed. Ethan didn't pull away or react with surprise. Instead, one of his hands moved to the nape of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair, and he deepened the kiss. Chloe felt as if the floor had disappeared from under her feet. The kiss was intense, possessive, as if he were marking his territory. She could feel the heat of his body, the scent of his cologne mixed with something more subtle and masculine. When she tried to pull away, his hand on her neck held her in place. The sound around them seemed to fade to a distant hum. There was only the two of them, lost in that moment that was supposed to be an act but had become something entirely different. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. Ethan looked at her with an intensity that made her feel as if he could see right through her. Interesting, he murmured, his thumb gently tracing her cheek. I have to go, Chloe managed to say, taking a step back. Not yet, he said, his voice low and commanding. We're not finished. Finished with what? We haven't started anything. No? He smiled, but there was something dark in that smile. Then why are you recording? Chloe looked down at the phone in her hand and realized the recording was still active. She quickly stopped it, but it was too late. He had seen. I can explain, she said. But even as she spoke, she knew there was no explanation that would make sense. You don't have to, he said, stepping closer again. I know exactly what's happening here. You do? She swallowed hard. Lauren Vanderbilt made a bet with you. Something about kissing me and recording it as proof. Chloe felt the world collapse around her. How did you? Because it's not the first time she's done this, he said simply. Lauren has a peculiar fascination with humiliating games. And you, my dear Chloe, have just become a pawn on her board. I didn't know. Chloe felt tears sting her eyes. I needed the money. For what? His voice softened slightly. My mother is in the hospital and I can't pay. She stopped, realizing she was saying too much to a stranger. Ethan studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes scanning her face as if memorizing every detail. 20,000, he said finally. What? I'm going to give you $20,000. Right now. Chloe stared at him, confused. Why? Because you're interesting, Chloe Miller. And it's been a long time since something interesting happened in my life. He took his phone out of his pocket and in a few taps opened his banking app. What's your account number? I can't accept that, she said, even though she knew she desperately needed the money. Of course you can, he said, typing quickly. Consider it payment for your services. What services? You just gave me the most honest kiss I've received in years, he smiled again, and this time there was something almost tender in that smile. Even if it was for money, it was real. I felt it. Me too, she admitted before she could stop herself. Then it's settled, he finished typing and showed her the screen. Transferred, Chloe checked. her phone and saw the notification from her bank. $20,000 had appeared in her account like magic. "I don't understand," she said, looking up at him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I have a feeling our paths will cross again, Chloe Miller." He leaned in and kissed her forehead gently. "And when they do, I want you to know you can trust me." Before she could answer, he turned away and disappeared among the guests, leaving her alone in the middle of the hall with a racing heart and $20,000 in her account. Lauren appeared, beside her like a ghost. "So?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Did you get it?" Chloe showed her the phone with the recording. Lauren watched with growing attention, her smile gradually fading as she saw the intensity of the kiss. "Interesting," Lauren murmured, handing the phone back. "Very interesting." "Where's my money?" Chloe asked. "Money?" Lauren laughed. "Darling, the game has changed. This wasn't just a kiss for money. This was—" She paused, searching for the right words. "This was the beginning of something much bigger." "What are you talking about?" "You'll find out." Lauren walked away, her black dress fluttering behind her like smoke. "Very soon." Chloe stood there for a few minutes, trying to process everything that had happened. The kiss, the money, Ethan's enigmatic words, and now Lauren's veiled threat. She looked around the hall for Ethan, but he had completely vanished. When she finally left the mansion, the rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy with moisture. As she waited for the bus on Park Avenue, she unconsciously touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of the kiss. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a pleasure. "Meeting you tonight, Chloe. Until soon. E.M." She stared at the message for a long time, feeling a shiver run down her spine. There was something about the words, "until soon," that sounded less like a possibility and more like a promise or a threat. When she got home to the small one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, Chloe immediately transferred $15,000 to the clinic's account. Her mother was safe, at least for now. But as she lay in bed that night, still wearing the borrowed dress, she couldn't stop thinking about the kiss, the way Ethan had looked at her, Lauren's words about the game having changed. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but his words echoed in her mind. "We're not finished." And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew he was right. 3 days had passed since the night at the mansion, and Chloe thought she could get back to her normal routine. She was wrong. The first strange thing happened on Monday when she arrived at the university. Professor Hayes, who taught corporate law, called her over after class with a smile she had never seen before. "Chloe, glad I caught you. I have an interesting opportunity for you," he said, arranging the papers on his desk with excessive care. "What kind of opportunity, Professor?" "A paid internship, very well paid, in fact." He avoided her direct gaze. "A company is looking for a junior legal assistant for a specific social project. I thought of you immediately." Chloe frowned. Professor Hayes had never shown any particular interest in her career before. In fact, she'd always had the impression that he saw her as just another scholarship student trying to get ahead. "What company?" "Montgomery Holdings," he said, and the name came out of his mouth as if it burned. Chloe's heart skipped a beat. "Professor, I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" "It's a unique opportunity, Chloe. The salary is excellent, and you'd gain invaluable experience at one of the biggest companies in the country. I have a feeling there might be a conflict of interest." Professor Hayes finally looked at her directly, and there was something strange in his eyes. Anxiety, maybe, or fear. "Chloe, I'll be frank with you. They specifically asked for you, by name. They said they were familiar with your work and were impressed." "My work? What work? I'm just a student." "They mentioned your project on corporate social responsibility that you presented last semester." Chloe vaguely remembered the project. It was an ordinary assignment, nothing exceptional. Certainly nothing that would attract the attention of a company the size of Montgomery Holdings. "Professor, may I ask how they contacted you?" He looked away again. "By email. They said they were looking for young talent for a special project." Something in his voice sounded forced, as if he were reciting a memorized script. "I need to think about it," Chloe said. Of course, but don't take too long. They want an answer by tomorrow." Chloe left the room with a weight in her stomach. She didn't believe in coincidences, and this was definitely not one. On her way home, she stopped at the hospital to visit her mother. She found Grace sitting up in bed, looking out the window with her distant eyes, those eyes that sometimes seemed to see things that weren't there. "Hi, Mom." Chloe kissed her forehead and sat in the chair beside the bed. "Chloe." Grace turned her face toward her daughter, but her gaze took a few seconds to focus. "You look different." "Different how?" "Prettier. More scared." She held her daughter's hand with cold fingers. "Did you meet someone?" Chloe felt a shiver. Even with her fragmented mind, her mother always had a frighteningly accurate intuition. "Why do you ask?" "Because you have the same sparkle in your eyes that I had when I met your father." Grace smiled sadly. "And the same fear." "Fear of what?" "Of losing yourself." The words echoed in Chloe's mind long after she left the hospital. Losing yourself. That's exactly how she'd felt since that night at the mansion, as if something fundamental had changed inside her. On Tuesday, she decided to accept the internship, not because she trusted the situation, but because she needed to understand what was happening, and a part of her, a part she tried to ignore, wanted to see him again. The Montgomery Holdings offices occupied 3 floors of a mirrored skyscraper on Park Avenue. When Chloe arrived at the reception, she was greeted by an elegant middle-aged woman who introduced herself as Susan, an executive assistant. "Miss Miller, so good to have you here." Susan smiled warmly. "Mr. Montgomery is eager to meet you." "He's here?" Chloe asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes, he is. He makes a point of personally meeting all new collaborators on the project." Susan led her through marble-lined corridors, past glass-walled rooms where impeccably dressed executives spoke on the phone or typed furiously on laptops. Everything was quiet, efficient, intimidating. They stopped in front of a double mahogany door. Susan knocked discreetly, and a familiar voice answered, "Come in." Ethan Montgomery was standing behind a massive desk, looking out the window at a panoramic view of New York City. When he turned to greet her, Chloe again felt that sensation of the air being sucked out of the room. "Chloe," he smiled, and there was something possessive in the way he said her name. "Welcome." "Mr. Montgomery," she replied formally, though her heart was racing. "You can leave us alone, Susan," he said, without taking his eyes off Chloe. When the door closed, the silence in the office became almost tangible. Ethan approached, not too close, but enough for her to feel his presence. "How's your mother?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. "How do you know about my mother?" "You mentioned at the party that you needed money for the hospital," he said calmly. "I imagine you've resolved the situation." "I have," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Now, shall we talk about the job?" He gestured for her to sit in a leather chair in front of his desk, while he remained standing, clearly assuming a position of control. "What kind of project is this?" she asked. "Social responsibility. We're creating a program to offer free legal aid to low-income families. You'd be responsible for initial screening, basic documentation, that sort of thing." It sounded legitimate, even noble. But there was something in the way he spoke that didn't sound completely sincere. "And why me? There are more qualified students with more experience." "But none with your personal history." He leaned against the desk, his eyes fixed on her. "You understand the needs of these families because you've lived it. That's more valuable than any academic experience." It was a smart answer, almost convincing. But Chloe wasn't naive. "Does this have to do with what happened at the party?" she asked directly. "It does," he answered without hesitation. "That kiss piqued my interest in you. I won't pretend otherwise." His brutal honesty disconcerted her. "Mr. Montgomery, Ethan. When we're alone, it's Ethan." "Ethan," she corrected. "I don't think mixing work with other things is a good idea." "Other things?" He smiled, and there was amusement in his eyes. "What would you call what happened between us?" "A mistake." "Liar," he said softly, but there was a sharp edge to the word. "You felt the same thing I did, and you still do." Chloe stood up abruptly. "I should go." "Should you?" He didn't move to stop her. but his voice carried an authority that made her pause. Or do you want to go? What's the difference? All the difference in the world. She stood there, torn between the urge to run and a morbid curiosity to see where this conversation would lead. Want to know the truth, Chloe? He approached, slowly, as if she were a wild animal that might bolt at any moment. It's been 3 days and I can't stop thinking about you, about your taste, your scent, the way your eyes closed when I kissed you. Stop, she whispered, but she didn't move away when he stopped right in front of her. I won't stop, he brought, his hand to her face, his fingers tracing her cheek with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity of his eyes. Not until I understand what's happening here. Nothing is happening, she lied. No? He leaned in, his lips almost touching hers. Then why is your heart racing? Why are you trembling? Chloe felt as if she were hypnotized. There was something about him that drew her in, that made all her defenses crumble. It was dangerous. It was wrong. And it was completely irresistible. I need this job, she said, trying to cling to reality. I can't afford to complicate things. Who said it will complicate things, he asked. Maybe it will make everything simpler. How? Take the job. Come work here. Let me take care of you. There was something in the way he said, take care of you, that set off an alarm in Chloe's mind. It didn't sound like protection. It sounded like possession. I don't need anyone to take care of me, she said. Of course you do, he said, and there was a certainty in his voice that irritated her. Everyone does. The difference is I want to do it. Why? Because you're mine, he said simply. The sentence fell between them like a bomb. Chloe took a step back, feeling as if she'd been slapped. I don't belong to anyone. Not yet, he smiled, but there was something dark in that smile. But you will. You're crazy, she said, heading for the door. Maybe, he didn't try to stop her, but that doesn't change the fact that you're going to take the job. She stopped with her hand on the doorknob. How can you be so sure? Because you need to, and because deep down you want to be near me just as much as I want to be near you. Chloe opened the door without answering and left, but his words followed her down the corridors, echoing in her mind like a prophecy. 3 hours later, she was back in the office, signing the contract. The first few days of work were surprisingly normal. Chloe was set up in a small but comfortable office on the 23rd floor, with a view of the city and a desk with everything she needed. Her work consisted mainly of reviewing documents, organizing cases, and meeting with families seeking legal aid. It was real, important work, and she felt useful for the first time in a long time. If it weren't for the constant feeling of being watched, she might have even convinced herself that this was just a normal job. But Ethan was always present, even when he wasn't physically there. He would appear in her office without warning, always with some professional excuse, but his eyes devoured her in a way that made her feel naked. He sent flowers to her desk, red roses, always red roses, with notes signed only with E. He offered to drive her home every night, and when she refused, he would simply smile as if he knew she would eventually give in. On Friday, a week after she started working there, Chloe stayed late finishing a report. When she finally left her office, the building was empty and silent. The automatic lights turned on as she walked down the corridors, creating an almost ghostly atmosphere. When she got to the elevator, she discovered she needed an access card to use it after business hours. Her card didn't work. Problem. Ethan's voice made her jump. He was standing near the executive elevator as if he had appeared out of nowhere. My card isn't working, she said. Ah yes, I forgot to mention. After 6 p.m. only a few cards have access. Security measure. He approached and swiped his card. The doors opened immediately. Thank you. She stepped into the elevator, hoping he wouldn't follow. He stepped in right behind her. I can give you a ride home, he offered, pressing the button for the ground floor. You don't have to. I'll take the bus. Don't be stubborn, Chloe. It's dark and late. She sighed, knowing it was useless to argue. Okay. His car was parked in the building's private garage. It was a black BMW, discreet, but obviously expensive. He opened the passenger door for her, a chivalrous gesture that would have been sweet under other circumstances. During the drive to the Bronx, they were silent. Chloe looked out the window, watching the city gradually change as they moved away from the financial district and toward the outer boroughs. "It's not what I expected," Ethan said when they stopped in front of her apartment building. "What?" "Where you live. It's more humble than I imagined." There was something in the way he said humble that annoyed her. "And what did you expect? A luxury apartment?" "No. But I didn't expect this either." He looked out the window at the simple building with its peeling paint and bars on the windows. "Well, this is what my reality allows." She opened the door to get out. "Chloe," he held her arm gently, "I didn't mean to offend." "You didn't," she lied. "Good night." "Good night." She climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment with the unsettling feeling that he was watching her windows from outside. When she reached her small but cozy living room, she went to the window and looked down. The BMW was still there, with Ethan sitting in the driver's seat looking up. They stared at each other across the distance and the darkness for a long moment. Then he started the car and drove away. But Chloe stayed at the window for another 20 minutes, her heart racing and a strange feeling in her stomach. That night she had the first dream. She was in a dark garden, surrounded by high walls. There were roses everywhere, but they were black, with thorns that gleamed like blades in the moonlight. In the center of the garden there was a white marble headstone, but she couldn't read what was written on it. Someone was calling her name, a woman's voice, soft but insistent. She turned, looking for the source of the voice, but only saw the black roses swaying in a non-existent wind. "Chloe," the voice said, "be careful of the roses. They bite." She woke up with a racing heart and her body covered in a cold sweat. She looked at the clock. 3 in the morning. She went to the kitchen for a glass of water and found a single red rose on the windowsill. That was impossible. She was on the 3rd floor and the window had been closed when she went to sleep. She picked up the rose with trembling hands. There was a note tied to the stem. "Sweet dreams. E." Chloe looked out the window again, but the street was empty. How had he managed to put that there? How did he know she was dreaming? And more importantly, what else did he know about her? On Saturday morning, she woke up determined to confront him. But when she got to the office, she found out he had traveled to Chicago on business and wouldn't be back until Monday. She spent the weekend restless, checking the locks several times and jumping at the slightest noise. No more roses appeared, but she had the constant feeling of being watched. On Monday, when she arrived at work, there was a box on her desk. Inside, an elegant black dress exactly her size and a card. "For dinner tonight, 8 p.m. Daniel, don't be late. E." Chloe crumpled the card, furious. He couldn't just assume she would have dinner with him. He couldn't make decisions for her as if she were a doll, but when 7:30 came, she was wearing the black dress, standing in front of the mirror in the office bathroom, trying to understand why she couldn't just go home. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the need to set boundaries. Or maybe, a whispering voice in her mind suggested, it was because she wanted to see him again, despite all common sense telling her to run in the opposite direction. Daniel was crowded, but when she gave Ethan's name at the reception, she was immediately led to a reserved table in a more private area of the restaurant. He hadn't arrived yet. She ordered a sparkling water and waited, her nerves on edge. 15 minutes later, just as she was about to leave, he appeared. He was wearing a dark grey suit that highlighted his eyes, and when he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that momentarily made her forget why she was angry. "You came," he said, kissing her hand before sitting down. "I came to set some rules," she said, trying to sound firmer than she felt. "Rules?" He seemed amused. "What kind of rules?" "First, stop showing up at my apartment. I don't know how you got that rose on my windowsill, but I don't want it to happen again." "Rose?" He tilted his head, looking genuinely confused. "What rose?" "The one on my window on Friday with your note." "Chloe, I didn't put any rose on your window, and I didn't leave any note." She studied him, looking for signs of a lie, but he seemed sincere. "Then who did?" "I don't know, but I'll find out." There was something in his voice, a sudden coldness, that made her swallow hard. "Second rule," she continued. "Stop making decisions for me. This dinner, the dress me, you can't just assume I'll do what you want. But you're here," he pointed out, "wearing the dress, because I need to make things clear between us." "And what things do you want to make clear?" She took a deep breath, preparing to say everything she had rehearsed, that this was just work, that she wasn't interested in complications, that he should keep his distance. But when she looked into his eyes, all the words died in her throat. There was something there, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before, mixed with an intensity that left her breathless. She began but couldn't finish. "You're afraid of me," he said softly. "I am," she admitted. "Why?" "Because you're too intense, too possessive. And I'm not good with that kind of thing." "What kind of thing?" "Relationships, intimacy, letting someone get too close." "Why not?" She hesitated. She wasn't used to talking about herself, especially not with someone like him. "Because everyone I've ever loved has left me," she said finally. "My father disappeared when I was 10. My mother, she's physically present, but mentally she's been gone for a long time. I've learned it's safer not to get attached." "I won't leave you," he said, and there was an absolute certainty in his voice. "You can't promise that." "I can. And I do." "Why? You barely know me." He was silent for a long moment, looking at her hands on the table. "Do you want to know the truth?" he said finally. "Since Helen died, I've felt empty, like a part of me died with her. I thought I'd never feel anything for anyone again." "Helen was your fiancée?" "She was," he confirmed, but there was pain in the word. "And when I saw you at that party, when I kissed you, for the first time in 3 years I felt alive again." "That doesn't mean anything," Chloe said, though her voice came out weaker than she intended. "It was just physical attraction." "Was it?" He reached across the table, gently touching her fingers. "Then why are you here? Why can't you stop thinking about me just like I can't stop thinking about you?" She wanted to deny it, wanted to say he was wrong, but it would be a lie. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Maybe," he intertwined his fingers with hers, "but sometimes crazy is the only thing that makes sense." They ate dinner in a comfortable silence, but there was an electric tension in the air that made it hard to concentrate on the food. Every accidental touch of hands, every prolonged glance, every smile seemed to carry a weight that went far beyond normal. When they left the restaurant, New York was shrouded in the typical June drizzle. Ethan offered her his jacket, wrapping her in the fabric that smelled of him. "Can I take you home?" he asked. This time she didn't refuse. In the car, the rain beat against the windshield, creating an intimate and isolated atmosphere. Ethan drove in silence, but Chloe could feel the tension emanating from him. "Chloe," he said, when they stopped in front of her building. "Yes? I want to kiss you again." The simple confession made her blush. "Ethan, but I won't. Not yet. When I kiss you again, I want it to be because you want it, not because you're confused or scared or feeling pressured." She looked at him, surprised by the unexpected consideration. "How will you know when the time is right?" she asked. "You'll tell me." "And if I never tell you?" "Then I'll wait." There was something in the way he said it, an infinite patience mixed with an absolute determination, that made her understand he was serious. "Good night, Ethan," she said, getting out of the car. "Good night, Chloe." She climbed up to her apartment with a racing heart, and his scent still enveloping her from the jacket she forgot to return. When she reached the window, he was still down there, waiting to make sure she had arrived safely. This time, when their eyes met across the distance, she didn't immediately look away. They looked at each other for a few minutes, a silent connection forming between them. Then he gave a brief wave and drove off. Chloe stayed at the window for a long time after he left, unconsciously touching the soft fabric of the jacket and wondering when exactly she had started to feel something for him that went far beyond physical attraction, and wondering if this feeling would be her salvation or her destruction. 2 weeks had passed since the dinner at Daniel, and Chloe's life had become an emotional roller coaster. She didn't know how to get off. Ethan kept his promise not to pressure her, but his constant presence was a pressure of its own. He would show up at her desk with coffee in the morning, always the way she liked it, though she had never told him her preference. He sent lunches from expensive restaurants when she worked late. He offered her a ride home every night, and when she refused, he would simply smile and say, "See you tomorrow," with a patience that frustrated her more than if he had insisted. The job itself was going well. Chloe discovered she had a talent for calming desperate families and organizing complicated cases. She was making a difference in real people's lives, and it gave her a sense of purpose she had never felt before. But there were strange things, small things that accumulated like raindrops forming a storm. Her social media accounts had followers she didn't remember accepting. Photos of her were tagged in places she had never been, and always, there were roses. Not just the ones Ethan sent to the office. Those were red, vibrant, obviously expensive. The others were different. They appeared on her apartment windowsill, on the table at the university library where she studied, on the bus seat where she usually sat. They were black or nearly black, with thorns that seemed sharper than normal. And they always came with notes. Never signed, always in the same cursive female handwriting. "He's not what he seems. Beware the garden. Ask about Helen." Chloe tried to talk to Ethan about it, but every time she mentioned the black roses, he grew tense and changed the subject. Once she caught him looking at one of the flowers with an expression that mixed anger and something that looked a lot like fear. The situation reached a breaking point on a rainy Thursday in July. Chloe was organizing some files when Susan appeared in her office looking nervous. "Chloe, there's a woman here who says she needs to talk to you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she insists it's urgent." "What kind of case?" "She wouldn't say, only that she knows you from school and that it's about the Montgomery family." A chill ran down Chloe's spine. "What's her name?" "Valentina Rodriguez." The name meant nothing to Chloe, but something in Susan's tone suggested it meant something to her. "Okay, send her in." Valentina Rodriguez was a woman in her 70s, with white hair pulled into a tight bun and faded blue eyes that looked like they had seen far more than they should have. She wore simple but clean clothes and carried a plastic bag that rustled when she moved. "Miss Chloe," she said, sitting in the chair in front of the desk with careful movements. "Thank you for seeing me." "How can I help you, Mrs. Rodriguez?" "You can start by explaining what you're doing working for this family." The direct question caught Chloe off guard. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand." "Of course you do." Valentina opened her bag and took out an old photo, yellowed at the edges. "You look so much like her, uncannily so." Chloe took the photo and felt her heart stop. The woman in the picture had her face. It wasn't a resemblance. It was like looking in a mirror. The same eye shape, the same mouth, even the same dimple on her chin. The only difference was the hair, which in the photo was blonde and wavy. "Who is she?" Chloe asked in a hoarse voice. "Helen Vanderbilt, Ethan's dead fiancée." The world seemed to spin around Chloe. She dropped the photo as if it were burning. "That's impossible." "That's what I thought when I saw you coming up from the parking garage the other day," Valentina said. "So I decided to do a little digging, and I found some interesting things about you, girl." "What kind of things?" "First, that your father, Robert Miller, worked for Montgomery Holdings, disappeared 14 years ago after asking some inconvenient questions about certain company transactions." The blood ran cold in Chloe's veins. "How do you know about my father?" "Because I was Ethan's nanny when he was a child. Then I became the housekeeper. I saw a lot over the years, things I shouldn't have seen." Valentina took more papers from her bag, old newspaper clippings, documents, photos. "Your father was investigating a money laundering scheme. He had proof. He was threatened several times, but he insisted on continuing. A week before he disappeared, he came to me." "He came to you? Why?" "Because he knew I knew the family's secrets. He wanted to know about the accidents." "Accidents?" Valentina hesitated, looking nervously at the door. Young women who got involved with the Montgomery men had a tendency to have accidents. Ethan's mother died under strange circumstances. when he was 15. His first serious girlfriend fell from her apartment balcony, and Helen... What happened to Helen? Officially, car accident. Rain, slippery road, lost control of the vehicle. Valentina leaned forward, lowering her voice. Unofficially, she was running away. Running away from what? From Ethan. She had discovered something about him, something that terrified her so much she abandoned everything, money, jewelry, apartment, and tried to leave town in the middle of the night. Chloe felt nausea rise in her throat. Are you saying he killed her? I'm saying that women who get too close to the Montgomery family's secrets die. And you, my dear, are the spitting image of the last victim. The room seemed to be spinning. Chloe stood up abruptly and went to the window, trying to breathe. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I like you, and because Helen was like a daughter to me. If she could speak, she'd tell you to run. This is crazy. Ethan would never... He's not violent. No? Valentina laughed bitterly. Then how do you explain the black roses? Chloe turned around quickly. How do you know about the roses? Because they appeared for Helen too, always, before something bad happened. She said it was like someone was trying to warn her. Who sent the roses? We never found out, but Helen thought it was someone in the family trying to protect her, or torment her. With the Montgomerys, it's sometimes hard to tell the difference. Valentina stood up and put everything back in her bag. Girl, I've done what I can. I've warned you. Now the choice is yours. But if you decide to stay, at least find out the truth about what happened to your father. How? Helen left some things hidden, papers, photos, recordings. They're in a safe deposit box at the Bank of America in Greenwich Village. She gave me the key shortly before she died. Valentina took a small key from her pocket and placed it on the desk. The account is in the name of Helen Rodriguez. She used my last name so she could open it without using Montgomery family documents. Why are you giving this to me? Because Helen was smart. If she hid something, it was important, and because you deserve to know what you've gotten yourself into. After Valentina left, Chloe stood in the room for an hour, staring at the key and the photo of the woman who had her face. Finally, she put everything in her purse and decided she needed some air. She was walking through the lobby when she bumped into Ethan getting out of the elevator. Chloe, he smiled, but the smile vanished when he saw her expression. What happened? We need to talk, she said. Of course. My office? No, somewhere neutral. They went to a small cafe a few blocks from the office. Ethan ordered 2 coffees, but neither of them touched their drinks. Who is Helen Vanderbilt? Chloe asked without preamble. The change in his face was instant. The color drained, his eyes narrowed, and for a moment she saw something that made her understand why other women might have run from him. Where did you hear that name? His voice was dangerously low. Does it matter? It matters a great deal. Chloe took the photo from her purse and placed it on the table. Ethan looked at it and for a long moment said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, colder. Where did you get this? A woman came to see me today, Valentina Rodriguez. She said she was your family's nanny. Valentina, he repeated the name as if it were a curse. I should have known. So it's true? Helen existed? Helen was my fiancée. She died 3 years ago in a car accident. Accident? Chloe repeated. Valentina said she was running away from you. Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Valentina always had a vivid imagination. Helen wasn't running from me. She was on her way to meet me. Then why does she look so much like me? He looked at her for a long moment as if deciding how much of the truth to tell. Coincidence, he said finally. Liar. Chloe? No. She stood up. I'm not accepting any more half-truths. Who was Helen? Why does she look like me? And what happened to my father? Your father? This time his surprise seemed genuine. What does your father have to do with this? He worked for your company. He disappeared 14 years ago. Ethan was silent for a long moment, processing the information. Robert Miller, he said finally. I remember him. You do? I was 21 when he disappeared. He worked in the finance department, was investigating some irregularities. And And one day he just didn't show up for work anymore. My father said he had decided to move upstate. Your father lied. Maybe. Or maybe you're believing the conspiracy theories of a woman who was fired for theft. Valentina was fired for theft. She was caught taking Helen's jewelry after she died. We tried not to make a scene out of respect for Helen's memory, but we had to let her go. Chloe felt confused. Nothing made sense. Either Valentina was lying, or Ethan was, or they were both omitting crucial parts of the truth. I need time to process all this, she said. Chloe, please don't let the fantasies of a bitter woman destroy what we're building. What are we building? I don't even know what this is. It's real. What I feel for you is real. But did you feel the same way about Helen? No, he said quickly. What I feel for you is different. Different how? With Helen it was calm, predictable. We had known each other since we were kids. Our parents expected us to get married. It was natural, easy. And with me? With you it's fire. He reached across the table, lightly touching her fingers. It's intense, complicated, impossible to ignore. It's like you've woken up a part of me I didn't even know existed. There was a sincerity in his voice that made her hesitate. But the photo of Helen, tucked away in her purse, seemed to burn like a reminder that things were rarely what they seemed. I have to go, she said, standing up. Chloe, please. I need to think, Ethan, about all of this, about us. She left the cafe without looking back, but she could feel his eyes following her down the street. That night alone. In her apartment, Chloe studied the key Valentina had given her. It was small and gold, with numbers engraved on the side, 1847. At 2 in the morning, still awake, she made a decision. The next day, she would go to the bank. She needed to know the truth, even if that truth destroyed any chance of happiness with Ethan. Because one thing Valentina had said was right. She deserved to know what she had gotten herself into. And if Helen had really left clues, Chloe would find them. The bank in Greenwich Village was small and discreet, exactly the kind of place where someone would hide secrets. Chloe arrived there on Friday morning, after making up an excuse to leave work. The clerk who assisted her was polite but cautious, especially when Chloe explained she was there on behalf of Helen Rodriguez, who had passed away. I'll need to see some documentation proving you're authorized to access the box, the woman said. Chloe showed her a letter Valentina had given her, handwritten by Helen, authorizing Valentina or anyone she trusted to access the box in case of an emergency. This isn't exactly a legal document, the clerk said. Please, Chloe insisted. It's very important. Helen was my cousin. The family only learned about this box after her death. The clerk hesitated, then sighed. All right, but you'll need to sign a liability waiver. The safe deposit box was smaller than Chloe had expected. Inside was a manila folder with papers, some photos, and 3 flash drives. Chloe took everything to a private room and began to examine the contents. The papers were mostly financial documents from Montgomery Holdings, but there were notes in the margins in a feminine hand. Dates, names, amounts that didn't match the official records. The photos were more disturbing. They showed Ethan at various ages, but always with young women. And on the back of each photo someone had written dates and words like disappeared, accident, overdose. But it was when she plugged the first flash drive into a computer at the bank that Chloe felt the world collapse. It was an audio file. The voice was female, young, scared. My name is Helen Vanderbilt. If anyone is listening to this, it means something has happened to me. I need to record what I've discovered about Ethan Montgomery and his family. The recording was almost 2 hours long. Helen spoke of a pattern of behavior. Ethan would fall intensely in love with young women, especially those in vulnerable situations. At first, he was the perfect boyfriend, attentive, generous, protective, but gradually he became possessive, controlling, obsessive. He has access to resources most people can't even imagine, Helen's voice continued. Private investigators, hackers, people willing to do anything for money. He monitors phones, social media, movements. It's like you become an object in his collection. Chloe paused the recording, her hands shaking. She thought of all the times Ethan had shown up in the right place at the right time, how he always knew exactly what she needed before she even asked. She continued listening. "The worst part is that he truly believes it's love," Helen said. "He doesn't see what he's doing as stalking or abuse. To him it's care, protection. And when you try to get away—" The recording stopped abruptly. Chloe inserted the second flash drive. It contained scanned documents, contracts, bank transfers, and in the middle of it all, a private investigation file on Robert Miller. Her father hadn't just disappeared. He had discovered that Montgomery Holdings was laundering money through shell companies. He had names, dates, amounts, and he was about to turn it all over to the FBI when he vanished. The private investigator's report, hired by Helen, was detailed and devastating. Robert Miller had been kidnapped, tortured to reveal what he knew, and then eliminated. His body was never found because it had been dissolved in acid at a rural property owned by the Montgomery family. Chloe threw up in the room's trash can. When she managed to compose herself, she inserted the third flash drive. It was a video. Helen appeared on the screen, her blonde hair disheveled, her face pale and showing signs of crying. "If you're seeing this, I'm probably dead," she said. "I tried to leave, tried to break up with Ethan, but he won't accept it. He said he'd rather see me dead than with another man." She showed photos on the screen. Chloe recognized some of them. They were the same ones she had seen in the folder. "He doesn't kill directly," Helen continued. "At least, not always. Sometimes it's arranged accidents. Sometimes the person just disappears. But the pattern is always the same. When he gets tired of a woman or when she tries to leave him, something happens." Helen leaned into the camera, her green eyes glazed with fear. "If something happens to me, tell my family I love them. And if one day a young woman who looks like me appears in Ethan's life, run. Run as far away as you can." The video ended. Chloe sat in the room in silence for almost an hour, processing everything she had discovered. Her father was dead. He had been murdered for investigating the family of the man she was falling for. And she herself was following the same path as Helen and all, the others before her. When she finally left the bank, the New York sun seemed different, colder, as if the whole world had changed color. Her phone rang. It was Ethan. "Hey, beautiful, how's your day?" His voice, which once made her smile, now chilled her to the bone. "It's fine," she managed to say. "Great. I was thinking of picking you up for lunch. There's a new restaurant I want to show you. Actually, I'm not feeling well. I think I'm going to go home." "Are you sure? I can have my private doctor take a look at you." Even over the phone, she could feel his possessive concern. How many times had he used that same line with Helen? "No need. It's just a headache. It'll pass." "All right. But call me if you need anything. Anything at all, okay?" "Okay. I love you, Chloe." The words fell like stones in her stomach. He had never said that before. I'll talk to you later." She hung up quickly. The phone rang again almost immediately. "Ethan." She didn't answer. It rang 3 more times on her way home. Each ring sounded more urgent, more desperate. When she arrived at her apartment, there were black roses scattered across her doorstep, dozens of them forming a path to her entrance, and in the middle of the flowers, an envelope. Inside, a single sentence written in the cursive female hand she now knew. "Now you know. Run." Chloe looked around the deserted street, feeling as if she were being watched. She quickly gathered all the roses and went inside, locking the door with deadbolts and chains. But even inside her apartment, she didn't feel safe. Because now she knew the truth, and the truth was terrifying. Ethan Montgomery wasn't just a rich and powerful man who had fallen for her. He was a predator, and she was the next prey. The first thing Chloe did when she got home was lock all the doors and windows. The second was to call Becca. "Becca, I need your help," she said as soon as her friend answered. "Chloe, you sound weird. What happened?" "I can't explain over the phone. Can you come over?" "Of course, I'm on my way." Becca arrived 40 minutes later with 2 grocery bags and a worried expression. "I brought wine and chocolate. From the sound of your voice, you're going to need both," she said, entering the apartment. "Now tell me what's going on." Chloe told her everything: the kiss at the party, the job at Montgomery Holdings, the growing involvement with Ethan, Valentina's visit, and finally the discoveries at the bank. She showed her the photos, played the recordings for Becca to hear, explained about the black roses and the mysterious notes. When she finished, Becca was pale. "Oh my God, Chloe, you have to get out of the city. Tonight." "To where? With what money? And my mum?" "Your mum will have to understand. Better for her to have a daughter alive in another state than a dead daughter in New York." Chloe knew Becca was right, but the idea of abandoning everything, of leaving her mother, of starting from scratch somewhere else, seemed impossible. What if I'm overreacting? What if Helen's recordings are wrong? What if you're dead next week? Becca interrupted her. "Chloe, this isn't a soap opera. This is real life, and rich, powerful men get away with things much worse than murder." Chloe's phone rang. It was Ethan again. She showed the screen to Becca, who gestured for her not to. "Answer." "He's called 15 times since I got here," Chloe said. "And look at this." She showed her the messages that had come in. "Chloe, I'm worried. Please call me. I need to know if you're okay. I'm stopping by your apartment after work. If you don't answer the phone, I'm calling an ambulance. You could be sick. I'm on my way." The last message had arrived 10 minutes earlier. "He's coming here," Becca said, standing up abruptly. "We have to leave. Now." "Where?" "My place, at least for tonight. Tomorrow we'll think of a better plan." They threw some of Chloe's clothes into a backpack and left through the building's back exit. Becca had parked 2 blocks away, and as they walked quickly through the poorly lit streets, Chloe felt as if they were being followed. When they turned the corner, they saw a black BMW parked in front of her building. "It's him," Chloe whispered. They hid behind a parked car and watched. Ethan got out of the vehicle and walked to the building. He buzzed the intercom several times, waited, buzzed again. Then he took out his phone and made a call. "He's calling me," Chloe said, feeling the phone vibrate in her pocket. They stayed hidden for another 20 minutes. Ethan remained in front of the building, clearly agitated. He made constant phone calls, paced back and forth, looked up at Chloe's apartment windows. Finally, another car arrived. A short, chubby man got out and started talking to Ethan. They gestured animatedly, as if they were arguing. "Who's that?" Becca whispered. "I don't know. I've never seen him before." The man took something out of his pocket. It looked like a phone or an electronic device, and showed it to Ethan. They talked a bit more, then both entered the building. "They went inside," Chloe said, panic rising in her voice. "How did they get in?" "Probably bribed the doorman, or they have keys." Becca grabbed her friend's arm. "Let's go, now." They ran to Becca's car and got out of there as fast as they could. In the rearview mirror, Chloe saw lights turning on in the upper floors of the building. They were searching the apartments. Becca's apartment was in Williamsburg, in a small, discreet building where she shared a 2-bedroom with a college roommate who was out of town. It was a perfect temporary refuge. "I need to call the police," Chloe said as soon as they got inside. "And say what? That your rich boyfriend is stalking you? With what proof?" "I have Helen's recordings, which were made by a woman who's been dead for 3 years, obtained through unauthorized access to a safe deposit box, using documents of questionable validity." Becca shook her head. "Chloe, it doesn't work like that. You need solid evidence. So what do I do? For now you hide, and you try to gather real evidence." They spent the night planning. Becca suggested that Chloe go back to work on Monday, acting as if nothing had happened, but avoiding being alone with Ethan. In the meantime, they would try to find more information about the other women mentioned in Helen's documents. "What if he finds out I know?" Chloe asked. "Then you run, fast." The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and planning. Chloe didn't leave Becca's apartment, and her phone never stopped ringing. Ethan called every hour, leaving increasingly desperate messages. Sometimes he was sweet and worried, sometimes he sounded annoyed. Other times there was a coldness in his voice that gave her chills. "Chloe, where are you? I'm so worried. Please call me. I need to know you're okay." I went to the hospital where your mother is. She said she doesn't know where you are. That last message made her freeze. He had gone to see her mother, using Grace to try to find her. See? Becca said when Chloe told her about the message. He has no limits. He's using your mother as bait. On Monday morning, Chloe dressed carefully. She chose clothes that made her look professional but not sensual, pulled her hair into a tight bun and put on glasses she rarely wore. She wanted to look different, less attractive, maybe to provoke less obsession. When she arrived at the office, Susan nearly jumped out of her chair. "Chloe, thank God you're okay. Mr. Montgomery was so worried." "I had a stomach flu," Chloe lied. "I couldn't even get out of bed." "He tried to call you several times. My phone broke when I fell in the bathroom. I only managed to get a new one this morning." The lies came easily, but Chloe knew Ethan wouldn't be so easy to fool. She didn't have to wait long. 15 minutes after she arrived, he appeared in her office. "Chloe," his voice was a mix of relief and something else she couldn't identify. "Where were you?" "Sick," she repeated the lie, without looking up from the papers on her desk. "Stomach flu, a really bad one." He approached the desk, and Chloe smelled the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something more subtle, restrained anger perhaps. "Why didn't you answer my calls?" "I told you my phone broke." "You could have used a landline." "I couldn't even get out of bed, Ethan. It was pretty serious." He was silent for a moment, studying her face. Chloe forced herself to keep working, feigning normalcy. "I went to your place on Friday," he said finally. "You did?" "I was worried. I couldn't get a hold of you." "I was sleeping. I probably didn't hear the buzzer." "I went on Saturday too. And Sunday." Now she looked at him. There was something different in his eyes. Something colder, more calculating. "You went 3 times?" "I was worried," he repeated, but the word sounded different the second time. "Well, as you can see, I'm fine," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He leaned over the desk, resting his hands on the glass surface. The movement was subtle but effective. Suddenly she felt trapped. "Chloe, did something happen? You're different." "Different how?" "Distant, cold. I'm still a little weak from the flu." "It's not that," he said, his dark eyes fixed on her. "It's something else." Chloe felt her heart race. He suspected. He didn't know what exactly, but he knew something had changed. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Are you sure?" He moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Because if someone said something to you, if someone tried to confuse you, with lies—" "No one said anything, Ethan. Valentina Rodriguez was here last week." The sentence fell like a bomb. Chloe tried to keep her expression neutral, but she felt the blood drain from her face. "Who?" "You know who." He straightened up, crossing his arms. "My former employee. A troubled woman who was fired for theft and has been spreading lies about my family ever since." "I didn't—" "She was here, Chloe. She was seen leaving your office. Susan told me." Chloe realized she had walked into a trap. Of course Susan was loyal to him. She probably reported everything that happened in the office. "She was seeking legal aid," Chloe tried. "For what?" "Labor issues. Something about wrongful termination." "And you believed her?" "I heard her case, like I do with everyone who seeks help." Ethan was silent for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. "What did she tell you about me?" he asked finally. "Nothing specific, just that you were a difficult boss." "And about Helen?" The name came out of his mouth like a test. Chloe felt like she was walking a tightrope over a cliff. "She mentioned a Helen, said you were once engaged. And what else?" "That she died in an accident." "I'm sorry for your loss." He studied her for another moment, then seemed to relax slightly. "Helen was complicated," he said. "She had mental health issues, paranoia mostly. She thought everyone was conspiring against her. Valentina always fed those fantasies." "What kind of fantasies?" "Conspiracy theories about my family, about accidents that supposedly weren't accidents, about people who disappeared, the ravings of a disturbed mind." He sat in the chair across from her desk, adopting a more casual posture. That's why I don't like it when people like Valentina show up here. They plant seeds of doubt, tell stories that sound convincing but are completely false. And why would she do that? Revenge, money, attention. Bitter people do terrible things. Chloe nodded, pretending to accept his explanation, but her mind was racing. His version was plausible, but there were too many details in Helen's recordings, too many specific documents. It would be impossible to fabricate all of that just for revenge. Chloe, Ethan leaned forward. I need you to trust me. If anyone comes to you with stories about me or my family, I want you to tell me immediately. I might sound paranoid, but there are people who want to hurt me. Why? Success creates enemies, money creates envy, and my family has a few skeletons in the closet. Nothing criminal, but things that could be misinterpreted if they got out to the media. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. You know what hurts the most? He said without turning around. It's the thought that you could believe I'm capable of hurting someone, especially you. There was genuine sadness in his voice, and for a moment Chloe almost gave in, almost believed. She was being paranoid, that the evidence was fake, that the man she was falling for was just the victim of an elaborate conspiracy. Almost. I trust you, she lied. He turned and smiled, and for the first time since he'd entered the room, the smile seemed genuine. Good, because I have a surprise for you. What kind of surprise? An apartment. I bought you an apartment. Chloe felt like she'd been punched in the gut. What? You live in a dangerous place, Chloe. I can't stop worrying about your safety. He took a set of keys from his pocket. It's in Midtown. A penthouse, 24-hour security, smart doorman, everything you deserve. Ethan, I can't accept an apartment. Of course you can. It's already registered in your name. Without consulting me? I wanted it to be a surprise. He placed the keys on the desk. I've already sent a moving company to get your things. They should be finishing up now. Panic seized Chloe. He had invaded her home, gone through her things, made decisions about her life without her consent. You had no right to do that, she said, trying to keep her voice controlled. I have the right to take care of the woman I love, he replied simply. And you're going to love the new place, you'll see. And if I don't want to move? His expression changed subtly. The smile remained, but his eyes grew colder. Why wouldn't you want to? It's a better apartment in every way, safer, more beautiful, closer to work. Because it wasn't my choice. Sometimes the people who love us make better decisions for us than we would for ourselves, he said. Trust me, Chloe. I'm doing this for you. She realized she had no real choice. To refuse would be to confirm his suspicions about her. To accept would mean falling even further under his control. Okay, she said finally. Thank you. Great, he smiled again. I'll show you the apartment at lunchtime. After he left, Chloe stared at the keys on her desk as if they were venomous snakes. She picked up her phone and sent a message to Becca. He bought me an apartment, already sent movers for my stuff. I'm panicking. The reply came immediately. Stay calm. We'll figure something out. Don't let him see you're scared. But it was too late for that. Because when Chloe looked through the glass wall of her office, she saw Ethan standing in the hallway, watching her through the glass. And there was something in his eyes that made her understand the game had completely changed. He knew that she knew. And now there was no more pretense of normality. It was a question of who would make the first move. And Chloe had the terrible feeling that she was already in checkmate. The apartment in Midtown was everything Ethan had promised, and more. A penthouse on the 30th floor, panoramic views of New York City, Italian designer furniture, a gourmet kitchen with appliances that cost more than Chloe's car. It was a dream from a design magazine. It was also a gilded cage. Chloe discovered this on the first night when she tried to go out to a pharmacy to buy medicine. The doorman, extremely polite, informed her that he needed authorization from the person responsible for the apartment to allow her to leave after 9 p.m. Responsible? She asked. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Montgomery left specific security instructions. It's for your own protection. She called Ethan, furious. It's temporary, he said calmly. Just until you get used to. The new neighborhood. There are a lot of muggings in the area at night. Ethan, this is ridiculous. I'm an adult. An adult I love and want to protect, he replied, and there was that possessive tone again. Please, be understanding. If you need anything, just call me and I'll have it delivered. Chloe hung up without responding and stood in the middle of the luxurious apartment, feeling like a bird in a golden cage. The following weeks became a careful dance between forced normality and growing paranoia. At work, Ethan was attentive but distant, as if testing her reactions. At home, Chloe discovered new forms of control every day. The internet had filters that blocked specific websites, including pages on domestic violence and psychological abuse. The landline didn't allow outgoing calls after 9 p.m. The building's security cameras, she discovered when she asked to see the footage after a staged robbery, were all connected to a private monitoring company owned by Montgomery Holdings. He was watching her every move, but Chloe learned to play the game. During the day, she feigned normality. She smiled at him in the office, accepted his gifts, let herself be kissed when he appeared in her office. At night, when she was sure she was alone, she investigated. The apartment, she discovered, had previously belonged to Helen. The closet drawers still had some of her clothes hidden in the back. The balcony had a small garden with red roses that someone continued to care for, though no gardener had appeared during the day. And there were the dreams. Every night, the same dream. A dark garden with black roses. A woman's voice calling her name. A growing sense of danger. And always at the end, a male figure approaching in the darkness, whispering, "You can't. Run from me." Chloe would wake up sweating, her heart racing with the strange feeling that she wasn't alone in the apartment. It was on a Tuesday in August that everything began to fall apart. Chloe was organizing some documents for the social project when she found a folder that shouldn't have been there. Inside were copies of medical reports, prescriptions for psychiatric drugs, therapists' reports, all in her name, all fake. According to the documents, she suffered from borderline personality disorder, had psychotic episodes, was prone to hallucinations and self-destructive behavior. There were even photos of her sleeping, taken, without her knowledge, with medical notes about disturbed sleep patterns and possible use of hallucinogenic substances. Chloe felt the world spin around her. Ethan was building a case to prove she was crazy. If something happened to her, if she disappeared or died, there would be extensive documentation of her mental problems, exactly as he had done with Helen. She photographed all the documents with her phone and put them back in the folder, her hands trembling so much she could barely hold the phone. She had to get out of there immediately. But when she got home that night, Ethan was waiting for her in the living room, sitting on the Italian leather sofa, as if he owned the place, which technically he did. "Hi, love," he smiled, but there was something predatory in that smile. "How was your day?" "Normal," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What are you doing here?" "Can't I visit my girlfriend at home?" "Of course you can. I just wasn't expecting you." He stood up and walked toward her, his footsteps echoing on the apartment's polished marble floor. "Chloe, we need to talk." His tone of voice set off all his alarms in her mind. "About what?" "About your mental health." The words fell like bombs in the silence of the apartment. Chloe felt as if she were falling into an abyss. "My mental health. I know you've been under a lot of stress. The job, your mother's situation, our relationship. Sometimes these pressures can affect our psychological balance." He moved closer, and Chloe instinctively took a step back. "I don't have psychological problems," she said. "Love, there's no shame in admitting you need help. I've arranged a consultation with the best psychiatrist in New York, Dr. Henry Vanderbilt. He specializes in personality disorders." The last name made her freeze. Vanderbilt, like Lauren. "I don't need a psychiatrist, Ethan." "Yes, you do," he said, and now there was no pretense in his voice. It was pure authority. "And you're going to see him tomorrow. It's all scheduled. And if I refuse?" "Why would you refuse unless you're really having problems and don't want to face reality?" It was a perfect trap. Refusing would prove she was in denial about her problems. Accepting meant walking into the office of a bought-and-paid-for doctor who would sign off on any diagnosis Ethan wanted. "Okay," she said because she had no other choice. "I'll go to the appointment." "Excellent," he smiled and kissed her on the forehead. "I knew you'd be sensible." After he left, Chloe ran to the bathroom and threw up. When she managed to compose herself, she called Becca from a payphone in the building's lobby. "Becca, he's trying to have me committed," she said as soon as her friend answered. "What? How?" Chloe told her about the fake documents, the scheduled appointment, the growing feeling that she was being slowly wrapped in a web from which she couldn't escape. "You have to get out of New York," Becca said. "Tonight, now." "How? He controls everything, the apartment, my job, my bank account." "Your bank account?" "He convinced me to switch to his bank, said I'd get better terms. Now I realize he has access to everything." "Chloe, listen, I'm going to borrow money from my family. I'm coming to get you now." "And my mom?" "Your mom will understand." "No." Chloe took a deep breath. "Not yet. I need more evidence. I need something that proves what he's doing, otherwise he'll find me wherever I go." "What kind of evidence?" "I don't know. But there has to be something. Helen got documents, recordings. There must be more." "Where?" Chloe thought for a moment. There was one place Ethan had mentioned a few times, always with a strange expression. A place he visited alone. His house. The mansion where the party was. He said he has a private office there where he keeps important family documents. "Are you crazy? Breaking into his house?" "It's the only way. If I can get solid proof, I can go to the police, the press, wherever I need to." "And how will you get in?" "He gave me the keys, said I could go there whenever I wanted, that it's my house too." "Chloe, Becca, if I don't do this now, I'll end up like Helen. Or worse. I'll spend the rest of my life in a psychiatric clinic, doped up on meds, while he tells everyone how hard it is to have a crazy girlfriend." Becca was silent for a long moment. "When?" she asked finally. "Tomorrow night, after the appointment with the psychiatrist. He'll be relaxed, thinking everything is going according to plan. I'm going with you. No, it's too dangerous. If something goes wrong, I'm not letting you go alone, Chloe. We've been friends since high school. We're in this together." The next day, the appointment with Dr. Henry Vanderbilt was exactly what Chloe had expected. The doctor, an elegant man in his 50s, conducted a psychological evaluation that was clearly aimed at reaching predetermined conclusions. "Have you been feeling paranoid lately?" he asked, making notes on a chart that seemed to be already filled out. "No." "Hallucinations? Voices? Visions?" "No." "Your boyfriend mentioned you've been having recurring nightmares. Bad dreams aren't a symptom of mental illness. It depends on the content of the dreams," he smiled coldly, "and the frequency." The session lasted 2 hours. At the end, Dr. Vanderbilt said he would need a few days to analyze the results of the psychological tests, but that he could already say there were worrying signs. "What kind of signs?" Chloe asked. "Paranoid tendencies, possible dissociative disorder, signs that you may be losing touch with reality." "That's absurd." "That's exactly the kind of reaction we expect from patients in this condition," he wrote something on the chart. "Denial is the first symptom." When she left the office, Chloe was furious and desperate. Ethan was waiting for her in the reception area with a bouquet of red roses. "How did it go?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "Fine," she lied. "Dr. Vanderbilt is very competent. I'm sure he'll help you feel better." On the way back to the office, Ethan was unusually talkative, speaking of plans for the future. A trip to Europe, maybe a small intimate wedding, the possibility of Chloe quitting her job to focus on her recovery. Chloe listened in silence, feigning interest, while mentally planning the break-in at his mansion. That night, she and Becca met in an abandoned parking lot in Bushwick. Becca had acquired basic equipment: flashlights, a digital camera, a voice recorder, a small crowbar in case they needed to force locks. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Becca asked, as they were approaching the Upper East Side. "I'm sure," Chloe answered, but her voice trembled slightly. The mansion was dark when they arrived. The gate opened automatically with the remote Ethan had given Chloe, and they drove slowly up the circular driveway to the main entrance. It's bigger than I imagined, Becca whispered as they got out of the car. The house rose like a sleeping monster against the dark New York sky. 3 stories of glass and steel, with impeccably manicured gardens and a fountain that murmured softly at the entrance. Chloe used the key to open the front door. The alarm system emitted a soft beep, but disarmed automatically when it recognized her fingerprint, another detail Ethan had arranged for her convenience. "Where do we start?" Becca asked, looking around the cavernous entrance hall. "He said his private office is on the 3rd floor. Let's go." They climbed the curved staircase, their flashlights creating dancing shadows on the walls lined with contemporary art. The 2nd floor seemed to be mostly guest rooms and a library. The 3rd floor had only 2 doors. The first was locked with a digital keypad that Chloe didn't know how to open. The 2nd opened easily. The office was immense, with an entire wall of windows overlooking the city. There was a mahogany desk in the center, shelves filled with books and documents, and several computer screens. "Look for anything that mentions Helen, my father, or the other women," Chloe said, heading for the file cabinets. They worked in silence for 40 minutes. Becca found contracts and business documents. Chloe discovered folders with photos of several young women, all marked with dates and observations in Ethan's handwriting. And then, in a locked drawer they managed to force open, they found the jackpot. An external hard drive labeled Private Collection. "What do you think is on it?" Becca asked. "Only one way to find out." Chloe connected the hard drive to one of the computers, the screen filled with folders organized by female names: Helen, Mariana, Fernanda, Juliana. And at the end of the list a new folder: Chloe. She clicked on Helen's folder first. There were hundreds of files. Photos of her sleeping, bathing, dressing. Recordings of phone conversations. Videos of her in intimate moments. And even more disturbing, recordings of sessions with psychiatrists, where voices that were clearly not hers gave answers suggesting mental instability. "He was drugging her," Becca whispered, pointing to a video where Helen looked confused and disoriented during a doctor's appointment. "Look how out of it she is." Chloe clicked on the folder with her own name. There were photos of her from her first day of work, recordings of her conversations with Becca, videos of her in the apartment, clearly filmed by hidden cameras, and, the most disturbing, a detailed plan on how to induce a psychotic break in her. "Drugs in the apartment's ventilation system," she read aloud. "Substances that cause hallucinations and paranoia. Increase dosage gradually until symptoms become obvious to external observers. That's why you've been having nightmares," Becca said. "He's been slowly poisoning you." There was more. Plans to stage a public psychotic episode, medical documents already prepared for compulsory commitment, and the most sinister of all, a will in her name leaving everything to Ethan in the event of death by suicide during a psychotic episode. "We need to copy all of this," Chloe said, plugging in an empty flash drive. That's when they heard the sound of a car arriving. They looked at each other, terrified. "Could be security," Becca whispered. Chloe looked out the window. A black BMW was parking at the entrance. Ethan's figure got out of the car and walked calmly toward the house. "It's him," she said, panic seizing her voice. "How did he know we were here? It doesn't matter. We have to get out, now." But it was too late. They heard the front door open, then footsteps on the marble floor of the hall. "Chloe," Ethan's voice echoed through the house. "I know you're here. Let's talk." Chloe finished copying the most important files and disconnected the flash drive. She and Becca hid behind a bookshelf, listening to his footsteps climbing the stairs. "No use hiding, love," he said, his voice getting closer. "The security cameras showed you coming in, and your phone's GPS confirmed you were here." Of course. The phone. Ethan probably had access to all its data. The footsteps stopped outside the office. "You know," he said, and now his voice sounded different, colder, more dangerous. "I'm disappointed." "Chloe, I thought you were smarter than this." The door opened and the light switched on. Ethan entered the office as if he owned the place, which of course he did. "Come out from behind the bookshelf," he said calmly. "Both of you." There was no choice. Chloe and Becca emerged from their hiding spot, their hands raised as if in a robbery. Ethan smiled, but it was the coldest smile Chloe had ever seen. "Hello, Becca," he said to her friend. "Long time no see. Still playing detective?" "How did you—" Becca began. "How do I know who you— Ah, please, do you think I'm an amateur?" He sat in the office chair, completely relaxed. "I know everything about both of you, about your families, your friends, your secrets." He pointed to the computer, where the files they had found were still visible. "I see you've discovered my collection. What do you think?" "You're a monster," Chloe said, finding her voice. "I'm a collector," he corrected. "And you, my dear Chloe, are my masterpiece." "Why? Why do this?" "Because I can, because it's fun, because women like you are so predictable." He stood up and walked to the window. "You think you're smart, independent, strong, but in the end you're all the same, vulnerable, needy, easy to manipulate. And if we refuse to play your games?" "You can't refuse." He turned to them, and his eyes were completely cold. "Because I have your mother, Chloe." The words fell like bombs in the silence of the office. Chloe felt as if the floor had disappeared from under her feet. "What do you mean?" "Your mother is no longer at St. Helena's Clinic. She's been transferred to a private institution that I finance, a very discreet place where patients receive special care." Chloe felt nausea rise in her throat. "You kidnapped my mother." "I transferred her to a more suitable location, where she can receive the treatment she really needs, and where she'll be safe, as long as you're a good girl." "Leave her out of this," Chloe shouted, taking a step toward him. "Quiet," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her stop immediately. "Your mother is fine, for now, but her well-being depends entirely on how cooperative you are from now on. What do you want?" "I want you to stop this foolishness of investigating my life. I want you to accept Dr. Vanderbilt's diagnosis. I want you to voluntarily enter a treatment program." "What program?" "A private clinic where you'll receive intensive medical care for your mental problems. It's a beautiful, comfortable place. You'll only stay there as long as it takes to recover." "And if I refuse?" "Then your mother will have an unfortunate relapse. Sometimes psychiatric patients do terrible things when they're not properly medicated." The threat was crystal clear. If Chloe didn't voluntarily submit to psychiatric treatment, her mother would be killed. "And Becca?" "Becca has a choice." He looked at her friend with almost clinical interest. "She can forget everything she saw here tonight and continue her normal life, or she can try to be a hero and find out that accidents happen all too frequently in New York." "You can't do this," Becca said, but her voice trembled. "I can do anything," he replied simply. "I have unlimited resources, connections in all the important areas, and very few scruples. You are two middle-class girls with no power, no influence, no protection. Who do you think the world would believe?" Chloe looked at the flash drive in her hands. She had evidence. She had proof of what he was doing, but he had her mother. "I'll give you 1 hour to decide," Ethan said, checking the expensive watch on his wrist. 1 hour to accept the treatment voluntarily, or your mother will have a violent psychotic episode that will end badly." "How do I know you won't hurt her anyway?" "Because I have no interest in hurting her. I'm interested in you. Your mother is just collateral." He approached Chloe, stopping so close she could feel the heat of his body. "Understand something, Chloe. I love you. I really do. Everything I'm doing is to protect us, to protect our relationship. These extreme methods are necessary because you're stubborn, but once you're cured, once you no longer have these paranoid ideas, we can be happy together." "You think this is love?" "I think true love means doing whatever it takes to keep the person you love safe, even if she doesn't understand it at the time." He kissed her forehead gently, a gesture that would have been affectionate under other circumstances, but now it made her feel as if insects were crawling on her skin. 1 hour, he repeated, heading for the door. "I'll be waiting for your call." After he left, Chloe and Becca stood in silence for several minutes, processing everything that had happened. "Chloe," Becca said finally, "we have to call the police." "With what proof?" "He'll destroy everything we found." "And my mother?" "We have the flash drive." Chloe looked at the device in her hands. And what does that prove? That he collects photos of women? That he has sick fantasies? None of that is evidence of a crime. It's evidence of stalking, invasion of privacy. Becca, look around us. Chloe gestured to the luxurious office. This guy has the whole system bought. Politicians, judges, doctors. He'll claim the evidence was planted, that I'm having a psychotic break, that you're helping me with my delusions. So, what do we do? Chloe thought for a long moment. There was one way out, but it was dangerous, very dangerous. You're going to leave, she said finally. You're going to get out of New York tonight. Go to your parents' house upstate and stay there. And you? I'm going to accept his treatment. Chloe, no, you'll die in that clinic just like the others. Not necessarily, Chloe held her friend's hand. If I accept voluntarily, he'll relax his guard. He'll think he's won, and in a clinic I'll be surrounded by other patients, other staff. It will be harder for him to eliminate me without raising suspicion. And then what? Then I play his game while I look for a way to escape. And you on the outside look for real help. Journalists, prosecutors, someone who isn't in his pocket. This is insane. It's the only chance we have. If we try to run now, he'll kill my mother and then find us. At least this way, I buy some time. Becca cried silently as she hugged her friend. Promise me you'll survive, she whispered. I promise I'll try. They left the mansion together, but separated at the first corner. Becca went home to pack, and Chloe returned to the apartment to call Ethan. I accept, she said when he answered. I knew you'd be sensible, he replied, and there was genuine joy in his voice. The admission is tomorrow morning. I'll pick you up at 8. And my mother? She'll be safe as long as you're getting treatment, you have my word. After she hung up, Chloe sat on the apartment's balcony, looking at the city of New York stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there, her mother was a prisoner. In a few hours, she would be too, but there was hope. Becca was free and had the evidence. And Chloe still had an ace up her sleeve that Ethan didn't know about. During the months working on the social project, she had met David Rodriguez, a district attorney who investigated crimes against women. He had given her his card and said that if she ever needed real help, she could find him. Before Becca left for upstate, she would stop by David's house and deliver the evidence. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all they had. Chloe spent the night awake, looking at the red roses on the balcony and wondering how many other women had been in this same situation, how many had looked at those same flowers before disappearing forever. But there was one crucial difference between her and the others. She knew exactly who Ethan Montgomery was, and she was determined to survive, to tell the story. The Serenity Hills Clinic was in an isolated area of upstate New York, surrounded by native forest and high walls that looked more like a prison's than a treatment center's. Ethan drove through the main gate as if he owned the place, which Chloe suspected was probably literally true. It's beautiful, isn't it? He said as he parked in front of the main building. Contemporary architecture, landscaped gardens, private rooms with views of nature. You'll feel right at home. Chloe looked out the window and saw a place that could have been from an architecture magazine, if not for the discreet bars on the windows and the uniformed security guards strategically positioned around the gardens. For how long, she asked. As long as it takes. Dr. Vanderbilt estimates that with the right treatment, you could be recovered in 6 months. 6 months. More than enough time for him to make her disappear in a way that seemed natural. And if I change my mind? About what? About staying here. What if I want to leave sooner? Ethan turned off the car and turned to her, his dark eyes fixed on her face. Chloe, you're here voluntarily to treat a serious illness. People with psychiatric disorders sometimes lack the mental clarity to make decisions about their own well-being. The message was clear. She wouldn't leave until he allowed it. The admission process was surprisingly civilized. The receptionist, an elegant woman in her 40s, treated her like a VIP guest. There were forms to sign, routine medical procedures, a guided tour of the facilities. Chloe's room was on the 3rd floor, overlooking the gardens, with a small balcony that had artistic bars that looked decorative but were clearly meant to prevent escapes. The furniture was tasteful. There was a flat-screen TV, air conditioning, a private bathroom. If it weren't for the door that only opened with a key card and the discreet cameras in the corners of the ceiling. It could have been a five-star hotel room. "Do you like it?" Ethan asked, standing in the doorway as she explored the space. "It's very nice. I want you to be happy here, Chloe, under the circumstances." He approached and kissed her softly on the lips. The kiss was gentle, almost affectionate, but Chloe had to fight the urge to pull away. "I'll visit you every day," he said, "and when you're better, we can start over the right way." After he left, Chloe was alone in the luxurious room, trying to process her new reality. She was officially committed to a psychiatric clinic. Any attempt to contact the outside world would be seen as a symptom of her illness. Any claim that she was being held against her will would be interpreted as paranoia. It was the perfect plan. At 6 in the evening, a nurse appeared with dinner and a small tray of medication. "Good evening, Chloe. I'm Nurse Rose. I've brought your dinner and the medication prescribed by Dr. Vanderbilt." "What medication?" "Mood stabilizers, anti-anxiety meds, some vitamins. Nothing major. It will help with the symptoms." Chloe looked at the colorful pills on the tray, probably drugs to keep her docile and confused, just like what had happened to Helen. "And if I don't want to take them?" "Why wouldn't you want to? They're for your own good," the nurse smiled. But there was something cold in that smile. "Patients who cooperate with their treatment recover much faster." Chloe pretended to take the medication, hiding it under her tongue until the nurse left, then spitting it into the toilet. She would have to be very careful. If they found out she wasn't taking the drugs, they would probably start injecting them. In the first week, she established a routine. She got up early, participated in the scheduled activities, chatted politely with the other patients during meals, and pretended to cooperate in therapy sessions. At night, after the lights went out, she discreetly explored the facility. The clinic had 3 floors. The ground floor housed the common areas: dining hall, activity rooms, doctor's offices, administration. The second floor was mostly rooms for patients with less severe problems. The third floor, where she was for special cases. There were only 6 rooms, all occupied by young women who seemed to be in a permanent state of sedation. The 4th floor was restricted. Chloe could only get as far as the elevator door before a staff member would appear to guide her back to her floor. It was by talking to the other patients that she began to understand the true nature of the place. Mariana, a 22-year-old blonde in the room next door, had been there for 8 months. She couldn't quite remember why she had been committed, but sometimes, when the medication had less effect, she would whisper things about a rich boyfriend who had become obsessive. Fernanda, a 25-year-old brunette, had been there for over a year. Her family thought she had suffered a nervous breakdown after an abusive relationship. She occasionally mumbled about someone named Edward Montgomery, probably one of Ethan's cousins. Juliana, the youngest, had only been there for 3 months, but already seemed completely disconnected from reality. She spent her days staring out the window, muttering about black roses and voices only she could hear. Chloe realized she was seeing the fate of all the women who had gotten involved with the Montgomery family. They weren't killed. That would be too obvious. Instead, they were kept alive but completely nullified, turned into empty shells through heavy medication and psychological isolation. It was a fate worse than death. In the second week, during a therapy session with Dr. Vanderbilt, she decided to try a different approach. "Doctor," she said, "I'm worried about my mother." "Your mother is being well cared for. You should focus on your own recovery." "But can I at least call her, just to hear her voice?" "Contact with the outside world can be detrimental at this stage of treatment. Your family has been informed that you are well." "What family? I only have my mother." "Mr. Montgomery is taking care of all the details. He truly cares about you." Dr. Vanderbilt made notes in his file, probably recording her anxiety and paranoid tendencies as symptoms that justified continuing the treatment. "Doctor, may I ask a question?" "Of course. How many women like me have you treated?" He stopped writing and looked at her directly. "Like you?" "Patients of Mr. Montgomery, or his family?" The silence that followed was telling. Dr. Vanderbilt was clearly uncomfortable with the question. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said finally. Helen, Vanderbilt, Mariana Santos, Fernanda Lima. Did they all go through your treatment? Chloe, these conspiracy theories are exactly the kind of paranoid thinking we are trying to treat. I'm going to increase your medication. It was exactly the reaction she had expected. Asking questions that were too on the mark was dangerous, but at least it confirmed her suspicions about the doctor's involvement. In the third week, something happened that completely changed the game. Chloe woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone crying. It wasn't unusual. Many patients had nightmares or nightly crises. But this voice was different. It was more lucid, more desperate. She got out of bed and went to the door. The sound was coming from Mariana's room. "Please," the voice said, I remember everything. Please help me." Chloe knocked softly on the door. "Mariana? It's Chloe. Are you okay?" The crying stopped. After a few seconds, Mariana's voice answered, but it was different, clearer. "Chloe, can you hear me?" "I can." "What's happening?" "Sometimes the meds wear off at night. That's when I can think straight," Mariana whispered. "I'm not crazy, Chloe. None of us are." "I know." "How? Do you remember?" "I've been hiding the pills for a week, pretending to take them but saving them under my mattress. My head is getting clearer." This was the breakthrough Chloe needed. If she could help some of the other patients regain their lucidity, maybe they could work together to find a way to escape. "Mariana, do you remember how you got here?" "I do. Peter Montgomery. Ethan's younger brother. He stalked me for months after I broke up with him. When I tried to file a police report, witnesses suddenly appeared saying I was making it all up, that I had mental problems. And your family. They believed him. He showed them photos of me in compromising situations, said I was using drugs, that I had tried to kill myself. My parents thought commitment was the best thing for me. It was the same pattern. Social isolation, discrediting the victim, manipulating the family. Mariana, do you know other women here? Do you know their stories?" "A few. Fernanda was engaged to Edward Montgomery. She tried to call off the wedding when she found out he was abusive. Suddenly, evidence appeared that she was having an affair and stealing money from the family company. Julia was dating a friend of the Montgomerys. When she broke it off, she started getting anonymous threats. When she went to the police, they said she was making it all up for attention." The pattern was clear and terrifying. The Montgomery family had an elaborate network to neutralize women who became problematic. They didn't kill them. That would attract too much scrutiny. Instead, they destroyed them psychologically and kept them trapped in a state of semi-consciousness. "Mariana," Chloe whispered, "do you want to get out of here?" "Of course I do, but how?" "I don't know. Yet. But if a few of us can stay lucid, maybe we can find a way." In the following days, Chloe passed on information about how to hide the medication to the other patients who still had some level of awareness. It wasn't easy. The staff was vigilant, and any sign of sudden improvement would be suspicious. But gradually, 3 of the women began to regain their mental clarity. Mariana, who had been there the longest, had more information about the clinic's operations. Fernanda remembered some details about the Montgomery family's properties. Juliana, the youngest, was still very confused, but sometimes had moments of lucidity. It was Mariana who discovered the crucial piece of information. "Chloe," she whispered one night, "I saw Dr. Vanderbilt on the phone today. He was talking about transferring some patients to the rural property." Chloe's stomach turned to ice. "What rural property?" "I don't know. But he said some of us were becoming resistant to treatment and needed more intensive methods." Chloe thought of Helen's recordings, of the documents they had found in Ethan's office. There were mentions of a rural property where accidents happened. When? He said it would be in a few days. That. They were preparing the transport. It was now or never. If they waited any longer, some of them would disappear forever. Chloe spent the next 2 days discreetly observing the staff's routines, mapping out shift changes, identifying security cameras and blind spots. There was a window of opportunity at 3 in the morning, when only 2 security guards were on duty, and made rounds at predictable times. On the chosen night, she woke up Mariana and Fernanda. Juliana was too sedated to be useful, and they couldn't risk carrying her. "Are you sure about this?" Chloe asked. "If we get caught?" "If we stay, we're going to die anyway," Mariana replied. "At least by trying to escape, we have a chance." They used bed sheets to improvise ropes and climbed down from the third-floor window. The garden was dark, but there were motion sensors that would turn on lights if they detected presence. Chloe had observed that the guards made rounds every 15 minutes, always on the same route. They managed to reach the back wall without setting off any alarms. It was high, about 10 feet, but there were nearby trees that offered support for climbing. Fernanda went first, then Mariana. Chloe was climbing when she heard the sound of footsteps in the garden. "Someone's escaped," a voice shouted. "Turn on all the lights." The entire garden lit up as if it were daytime. Chloe was hanging on the outside of the wall, but still visible if someone looked in the right direction. "Jump!" Mariana whispered from the other side. Chloe let go and fell heavily onto the grass outside. A sharp pain shot up her left leg, but she managed to get up. They were free. They ran down the dark road for over a mile before finding a house with lights on. It was the middle of the night, but there was activity, probably a baker starting his early shift. The man who answered the door was shocked to see 3 women in hospital gowns, clearly in a panic. "Please," Chloe said, "we need to call the police. We were being held prisoner." He let them in and offered them the phone. Chloe called District Attorney David Rodriguez directly, whose number she had memorized weeks before. "David, it's Chloe Miller. I need help. Urgently." David arrived in 40 minutes with 2 detectives and an investigation team. In the meantime, Mariana and Fernanda told their stories to the first officers who arrived. The accounts were too consistent to be ignored. "Chloe," David said when he arrived, "where have you been? Your friend Becca came to me 3 weeks ago with evidence about Ethan Montgomery, but you had disappeared. He had me committed to a psychiatric clinic. He was drugging me, holding me prisoner. Serenity Hills Clinic? You know it? We've been investigating it for months. We've had several reports from families looking for young women who disappeared after suspicious commitments. What followed was a bureaucratic nightmare that unfolded rapidly. With the consistent testimony of 3 women and the evidence Becca had provided, David secured search and seizure warrants for the clinic and all of the Montgomery family's properties. The police raid on Serenity Hills Clinic was spectacular. They found not only the patients being held under forced sedation, but also an entire wing on the 4th floor where women who had been officially declared dead were being kept in a vegetative state. Ethan was arrested the next morning at his mansion. When the police arrived, he was calmly eating breakfast as if nothing had happened. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, as they read him his rights. "These women are psychiatric patients. They are clearly delusional." But the evidence was overwhelming. The hard drive Chloe had copied, combined with the files found at the clinic and the victims' testimonies, painted a clear picture of a criminal organization that kidnapped and imprisoned women. Chloe's mother was found in a private clinic in a small town upstate, sedated but alive. She had been kept in a state of semi-consciousness, but had suffered no permanent physical damage. Ethan Montgomery's trial lasted 6 months and was one of the most followed by the national media in a decade. The scandal brought down politicians, judges, and doctors who were involved in the scheme. Serenity Hills Clinic was permanently shut down, and a federal investigation was opened into all the family's properties. During the trial, more than 20 women came out of the woodwork to tell their stories. The pattern was always the same: relationships that began like fairy tales and turned into nightmares of control and manipulation. Chloe testified for 3 consecutive days. It was difficult to relive everything, especially with Ethan sitting just a few feet away, his dark eyes fixed on her face with the same intensity that had once fascinated her and now only disgusted her. "Miss Miller," the defense attorney asked during cross-examination, "don't you think it's possible that your perceptions were distorted by the use of psychiatric medication?" "No," Chloe answered firmly. "I pretended to take the medication. My mind was clear the entire time I was at the clinic. But you admit you were under great emotional stress." I was under great stress because I was being held prisoner by a man who had kidnapped and blackmailed me. She looked directly at Ethan as she spoke. There is nothing irrational about being afraid of someone who is threatening your life. In the end, Ethan was sentenced to 45 years in prison for kidnapping, false imprisonment, racketeering, forgery, and a host of other crimes. His accomplices received lesser sentences in exchange for cooperating with the prosecution. Dr. Vanderbilt lost his medical license and was sentenced to 20 years. Lauren Vanderbilt, who was revealed to have been a key player in identifying and recruiting victims, was sentenced to 15 years. But for Chloe, the real victory wasn't in the court sentences. 2 years after the trial, she was sitting on a simple porch of a small house in Seabrook, New Jersey, watching the sea stretch to the horizon. Beside her, Grace knitted calmly, her mind clearer than it had been in years since she stopped taking the drugs the clinic had forced on her. "You seem at peace," her mother said, without looking up from her knitting. "I am," Chloe replied. And it was true. There were difficult moments, of course, occasional nightmares, moments of panic when she saw black BMWs, a reluctance to trust men who seemed too interesting, too attentive. But she was in real therapy with a competent psychologist, and she was gradually rebuilding her life. Becca came to visit them every weekend, driving from upstate where she now worked as a lawyer for an NGO that helped women victims of domestic violence. Mariana had moved to Los Angeles and was studying psychology, determined to help other women who had gone through similar experiences. Fernanda was in physical therapy. The months of forced medication had affected her motor coordination, but she was recovering well. They kept in touch, a support network formed by shared tragedy but strengthened by survival. Chloe never went back to New York City. The big city, which had once represented opportunities and dreams, was now too associated with memories she preferred to leave behind. In Seabrook, she found work at a small local law firm, helping fishing families with labor and environmental issues. It didn't pay much, but it was enough for her and her mother to live with dignity. And there was peace, real peace, not the false tranquility that Ethan had tried to impose through control and manipulation, but the peace that comes from genuine freedom. Sometimes walking on the beach at the end of the day, Chloe would think about the night it all began. The party at the mansion, the kiss that was supposed to be just a bet for money, the way he had looked at her as if she were something he needed to possess. There was something poetic about her story ending on a beach. There were no walls, no bars, no artificial limitations, just the infinite horizon and the freedom to walk in any direction she chose. One afternoon, almost 3 years after the trial, she was walking on the sand when something caught her eye. A red rose half buried in the sand, probably left by some romantic tourist. For a moment she felt a shiver of fear, but then she remembered Ethan was in a federal penitentiary 500 miles away. There were no more black roses mysteriously appearing, no more threatening notes, no more eyes watching her from a distance. She picked up the rose and took it home, placing it in a vase on the kitchen table. Grace smiled when she saw it. "How pretty," she said. "Where did it come from?" "The beach. Someone must have lost it." "Or maybe the sea brought it to you." Chloe laughed. Her mother had always been poetic, even in the worst moments of her illness. It was one of the things she had missed most and was happiest to have back. That night, she dreamed of gardens. But they weren't dark gardens with black roses and threatening voices. It was a sunlit garden, full of colorful flowers and the sound of children playing in the distance. When she woke up, there was no more fear. A few months later, Chloe met Ryan, not at a lavish event or through dramatic circumstances, but in line at the bank when he helped her pick up some papers she had dropped. He was a high school history teacher, divorced with an 8-year-old daughter. His interest in her was gradual, respectful, unhurried. It took him 3 months to ask her out, and when he did, it was with a simplicity she found refreshing. "I like you, Chloe. I'd like the chance to get to know you better." They dated for 2 years before getting married. The ceremony was small, on the beach, with only their closest friends and family. Becca was the maid of honor. Mariana and Fernanda came especially for the occasion. Grace cried with happiness. during the vows, Chloe looked at Ryan and saw something she thought she would never find again: true love. Not the possessive obsession that Ethan had mistaken for love, but the genuine feeling that grows slowly, based on mutual respect, trust, and free choice. "I promise to respect your independence," Ryan said during his vows. "I promise to support your dreams without trying to control them. I promise to love you as you are, not as I wish you were." They were simple words, but for someone who had survived what Chloe had survived, they were the most romantic words in the world. Years later, when her daughter with Ryan turned 5, Chloe was organizing old photos when she found one she had forgotten. It was from her university graduation. She had finished her law degree through correspondence while she was recovering. In the photo, she was smiling genuinely for the first time in a long time. On the back of the photo, someone had written a sentence. She didn't recognize the handwriting but suspected it was Becca's. "Strong women are not born. They are forged by adversity and emerge brighter than before." Chloe smiled and put the photo back in the album. Outside, she could hear Ryan playing in the yard with their daughter, their laughter mixing with the sound of the nearby ocean waves. There were many things Ethan Montgomery had tried to take from her: her freedom, her sanity, her ability to trust, her family, her life. He had almost succeeded with some of them, but there was one thing he had never managed to touch, no matter how hard he tried: her inner strength, the part of her that refused to be broken, that found ways to resist even when all exits seemed blocked, that kept her lucid even when everyone around her insisted she was crazy. That strength had saved her, and more than that, it had allowed her to save other women too. The last she heard of him, Ethan was serving his sentence in a federal penitentiary with no prospect of parole for at least 30 years. He had tried to appeal the sentence several times, always without success. The lawyers he had left after the scandal were incompetent compared to the ones he had before. Chloe felt no satisfaction in his suffering, but she felt a deep gratitude knowing that he couldn't hurt anyone else. And sometimes, when she was walking on the beach at dusk, watching the sun set over the infinite ocean, she thought of all the women who hadn't been as lucky, the ones who couldn't escape, the ones who didn't find allies, the ones who didn't get a second chance. For them, she continued to tell her story whenever she had the opportunity, in lectures to university students, in interviews with journalists investigating similar cases, in conversations with lawyers representing other victims. Because in the end, the greatest victory over someone like Ethan Montgomery wasn't just in escaping him, but in ensuring that her story served as a warning and an inspiration to other women. True love, Chloe had learned, doesn't bind. It frees, it doesn't control, it empowers, it doesn't diminish, it multiplies. And when she finally found that true love with Ryan, she fully understood the difference between the gilded cage Ethan had tried to create for her and the genuine freedom that comes from being loved for exactly who you are. 5 years after marrying Ryan, on a sunny December afternoon, Chloe was on the porch of her simple, happy home when the mailman brought a letter. The return address made her pause. It was from the federal prison complex where Ethan was serving his sentence. For a moment, she considered throwing the letter away without opening it. She owed him nothing, had no obligation to read whatever he had written. But curiosity won. The letter was handwritten in a script she recognized immediately. It was short. "Chloe, I know I have no right to write to you. I know I caused immeasurable pain in your life and in the lives of many other women. I don't expect forgiveness, nor am I asking for it. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. What I felt for you wasn't love. It was possession. It was a sickness. And even if I spend the rest of my life in prison, at least now I know the difference. I'm glad to know you found real happiness. You always deserved it. E." Chloe read the letter twice, then set it aside. There was something in it, a tone of genuine understanding she had never heard from him before. Maybe prison and forced therapy had finally made him see the reality of his actions. Or maybe it was just another manipulation, one last attempt to make her feel sorry for him. In the end, it didn't matter. Her life had moved on. She had built something beautiful and real from the ruins he had tried to create. Chloe folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and never thought about it again. Outside, Ryan was coming home from work, and she could hear their daughter running to greet him at the door. It was the sound of real happiness, simple, everyday, undramatic. It was the sound of freedom. Chloe smiled, put her memories back where they belonged now, not forgotten but no longer defining who she was, and went out to greet her family. Outside, the December sun shone on Seabrook. The sea breeze brought the scent of salt and freedom, and there wasn't a single black rose in sight. It was exactly as it should be.